Thank you for another spiritual discussion. Today's video is about the disclosure of the wisdom of Kabbalah. The wisdom of Kabbalah is the most ancient of all wisdom. It goes back to the times of Abraham the patriarch, which is the 18th century BC, 3,800 years ago. Abraham the patriarch was just like anyone else in Babylon, in Ur of Chaldea. He discovered godliness, something completely outside of this world, and wrote a book about it called the Book of Creation, which is actually the first book on the wisdom of Kabbalah. There were many more Kabbalists after him, his disciples, his sons, his grandsons, and they all engaged in it until the second disclosure of the wisdom of Kabbalah by Moses during the exile from Egypt. Moses was a great Kabbalist who wrote the book of Torah for us, where he too expressed his own revelations in the upper world, but in a different language. Abraham wrote in the language of names, while Moses expressed himself in a different language, the language of branches, because everything in this world comes from above, from a higher world. There's a complete correlation between all the items of the upper world and the items of our world. In our world, we have a language and denominations and names for every item before us. And we can take these names and seemingly go up a level to a higher world and use these names to describe everything that happens here. That's what Moses did, and it is called the language of branches. We have the book of Torah thanks to that. People in this world think it talks about this world, about history, romance, all sorts of journeys and incidents. However, those on a higher plane at which Moses was writing about can see that Moses didn't write about this world, but about what's in the upper world, the souls, how they ascend and descend, incarnations, and the entire upper system. That's what he really wrote about, and thus the Torah is the second book. That would mean that the Bible is a book of codes concerning spirituality and not really a history book of events. Next comes the book of Zohar, that's Zohar. It is the most well known book on the wisdom of Kabbalah. Though no one understands it, still, it is very well known among those who study Kabbalah. The Zohar is written in the language of the Midrash. That's Midrash for those who wish to research that more. That's a different language, not like Abraham, who wrote his book in the language of names, and unlike Moses, who wrote in the language of branches, using words of this world. The Zohar is written like fiction, imaginary, and poetic. It seemingly speaks about this world and the upper world, but it's a language of legends called the language of Midrash. After the Zohar, there are many more books on the wisdom of Kabbalah. After a person is completely um, despaired with his prior situations and reaches a state where it seems there's nothing in this world to fulfill him, then he asks, what is this purpose of my life? Why do I exist? What is this life for? What's the reason for it and for the suffering and so on? These are questions from a higher plane, so to speak. From there on begins the spiritual will to receive. They begin to ask something about beyond this world, about the reasons that are beyond this world. This is when the wisdom of Kabbalah should be revealed. Why? Because it answers those questions. And when it is revealed, it improves people. It provides support for them and corrects them. People can understand how reality is constructed. They can understand the upper world and know the providence and the guidance from the upper world and how it works on them. This begins to create spirituality in the person, where they begin to take on the characteristics of the Creator, which is restore. This is a desire to give rather than to receive. Man gradually acquires the property of restore as if climbing the rungs of a ladder, one after another, until he reaches the goal. Climbing the rungs of the spiritual ladder, humankind continues ascending until it reaches the purpose of creation. There are two paths that we can take in this world: the path of suffering and the path of Kabbalah. The path of suffering represents the order of creation's self development. Because of its nature, it has to follow this path, moving from one stage to the next, which is connected to the previous ones by cause and effect. In this way, we develop very slowly until we realize the necessity of choosing good, denying evil, and reaching the connection sought after by the ruling force. However, this path is time consuming and full of pain and suffering. The path of Kabbalah is easy and pleasant, capable of making us worthy of our predestination in a short period of time and without suffering. The basic of every evil is the love for oneself called egoism. This quality is opposite to the upper force that only possesses the desire to bestow. The essence of suffering and impatience lies in the opposition to the properties of the upper force. That is why egoism itself causes us pain through our realization of the difference between our properties and those of the upper force. An underdeveloped person does not consider egoism a bad quality and therefore openly use it without shame. A more developed person already feels a certain degree of his egoism as evil and therefore hesitate to use it in public and continue using it secretly. But a highly evolved person feels egoism as something so disgusting that he cannot tolerate it. Therefore, he expels it completely in accordance with his level of realization, for he neither wishes nor is able to receive pleasure at the expense of others. Sparks of love for his neighbor begin to awaken in the person. True forces pushes us forward and compels us to climb the spiritual levels until we reach the final goal, when our properties become equal to those of the upper force. One of the forces compels us without our choice or realization. It pushes us from behind. Kabbalists call it the path of suffering. The second force pushes us forward by means of our conscious awareness. We choose this force on our own. It draws us from the front, and Kabbalists call it the path of Kabbalah. We take this path and follow the advice of Kabbalists with the intention of making our properties equal to the upper force. Whereas The person studying Kabbalah for the sake of bestower to the upper force and similarity to his actions and receiving nothing in return really climbs the moral levels. Little by little, he acquires a new, different nature of bestower to his neighbor. He receives nothing for himself but the bare necessity to sustain his existence in this world. But in this, he is fulfilled. I will bring this video to a close and we'll pick up in the next video talking more about Kabbalah. Please feel free to share it with others. If you would like to see more of this type of content, please click the subscribe button below on this channel. I will also love for you to post your comments and questions below. Just be respectful to one another. Until next time, give these things some thought and begin to do some research on your own. Bye for now.